Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's continue our game of Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Oh no, damn it. Hit start. That's the first thing. That's the first thing that's available. It's not continue. A lot of games have continue as the first option. I can't be the only one that does that. We ended up in a stairwell. It was dimly lit, and like the rest of the floor we were on, there was nobody here at all. Nobody came by either. It was shocking to me that just 5 minutes from Shibuya Station, and inside the Roft building, one of the most famous stores in Japan, there was a space that could be this empty. I lived in Shibuya for almost 2 years and didn't know that. How'd you figure this out in just a few weeks? Kozubi sat down on the steps, clearly in a good mood. She casually set the D-sword down next to her. The pain in my side was getting too much for me to bear, so I decided to take a rest. What was she talking about? Oh, that. Yeah, I'd seen that before. I tried to see something like that on top of the O-front building and succeeded. I'd seen the D-sword blended in with the scenery. A Hanponpon? How did you get it, though? I'd found it, but I couldn't grab it. No matter how much I reached out, I couldn't touch it or grab it. Wished? You wished you could get the sword? But I did that too. Kozubi looked up at me, softly shaking her head. I could hear the voice of her mind clearly within my own. I hadn't mistaken it. I heard exactly what she said. My wish was to kill? She said it with a smile, too. The stairs leading up from the 5th floor of the Roft building to its 6th floor were very quiet. You could only faintly hear the music coming from the shops. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. I could hear somebody's breath loudly in my ears. Was it hers? No, it was mine. A staircase where nobody came. A blind spot in the dead center of Shibuya, an air pocket. I gulped down saliva to wet my suddenly parched throat. And then what happened? What did you do?
殺そうとしたけど、できなかった。コズピーの力じゃ半殺しにするのが精一杯だったのです。
This girl was broken.
壊れてないよ。ぷんぷん。ここに剣あるもん。
She was gazing lovingly at the sword next to her. I could tell from the way she was looking at it that she had complete trust in it. Her mind was telling me the same thing. Maybe I couldn't get the D-sword unless I was broken too. Wait, did this mean I wasn't broken already?
この剣が怖くて仕方なかった。
That's what she thought until she came to Tokyo. But now she felt differently. Now it was something precious, something very important to her. As long as she had the sword, there was nothing to be scared of. The sword would protect her. The sword was her heart. It was her other self. It was about 3 weeks ago that she changed her mind. Kozui had always had the power to hear what other people were thinking. She couldn't remember anymore when she'd first realized she had it. She thought she'd gone crazy or that she was sick. In her own childish way, she thought that she couldn't let anybody find out. She hadn't told anybody, not even her parents. Because of her power, she couldn't make any friends. It created a rift between her and her family, too. All the people around her started to think she was creepy, that her intuition was a little too good. Even after coming to Shibuya, she'd been scared to go out to school. She hadn't wanted to talk to anybody. She thought they'd just find her creepy again. The first day she was supposed to go to school, and the day after that, and even the day after that, she'd skip school and spent the day wandering around Shibuya instead. She knew the school must have contacted her parents. They must have known Kozui wasn't going, but the two of them didn't say anything to her at all. Kozui looked young enough to be mistaken for a middle schooler, and yet, unlike back home in the countryside, nobody stopped her when she went out in the middle of the day. She spent days wandering around Shibuya. She'd found her little peaceful spot in the loft stairwell, and every day she'd go up there to sit. One day she spent almost 4 hours there until the sun finally began to set. Then she left Roth to go home. Raindrops were pouring from the dull gray sky. She hadn't brought an umbrella, but she neither looked up at the sky nor seemed to care about getting wet. She simply headed home through the rain on unsteady feet. Then she saw something in the corner of her eye. It was a sign that read, "The end is near." The handwritten text was blurring in the rain. Holding the board was a homeless man sitting unobtrusively on the side of the road in the middle of the pouring rain. His head was slumped forward, and she couldn't see his expression. He might have been dead. The way he looked reminded her of how she'd looked sitting in the rough stairwell. She stopped. For a moment, she hesitated. She'd never met this man and had never seen a homeless person until she came to Tokyo. He looked repulsive. She was scared that if she talked to him, something horrible might happen to her. But there was another desire that won out over her fear, a desire to kill him. It was such a sudden, strong impulse that she thought that if she obeyed it, she might be able to kill herself too. So, after a short moment's hesitation, she spoke to him with the voice in her mind.
世界は終わるの?
Suddenly, his shoulders twitched. He wasn't dead after all. He slowly raised his head. His cloudy eyes peered through his soaked hair as he looked up at her.
ああ、終わるよ。
Kozui's eyes went a little wide with surprise. Not at being told that the world would end, but at the fact that the man had replied to her. She hadn't expected a reply. Most people she spoke to like this either tried to convince themselves they were hearing things or got scared and quickly left. Even if she did succeed in communicating with somebody, it was hard for them to send back such a straightforward, understandable reply. Doing so was difficult. Human thought was disordered and random. But the man hadn't seemed surprised at all. Instead, he'd given her a short, simple answer. Through his voice, she could feel a deep sadness filling his heart. His heart was crying. That's how it felt to her.
君は剣を持っているね。
どうしてわかるの?
君のような子を他にも知っているから。
She put her hand above her head and summoned her D-sword. She pointed the blade at him.
この剣が見えるの?
見えないよ。
じゃあ、どうしてわかるの?
おじさんが悪い人だからだよ。すまない。
どうして謝るの?
おじさんのせいなんだ。
どうして おじさんのせいなの？
忠告しかできないから。動き出してしまったから。もうおじさんには止める術がないから。
じゃあおじさんを殺せばコズピーは悪くなくなるの？
その剣は君を殺す者にも守る者にもなる。思い出してごらん。空を見れば雲が。川を見れば流れがそこにあったはず。それと同じこと。その剣はいつも君のそばにあった。自分自身の心を見てごらん。そこにあるのがその剣なんだよ。
でも殺したいって願ったらこれが手元にあったんだよ。この剣はコズピーとコズピーの周囲にあるあらゆるものを殺すためのものじゃないの？
負の感情は否定されるものじゃない。人が誰しも持つものだからね。特別じゃないんだ。どう向き合うかだよ。目をそらしてはいけない。自分を否定してはいけない。世界は共造。君の心の中にある性は同時に負となりうるし、その逆もまた可能。世界が終わるのか生き続けるのか、それを選べるのは君たちだけなんだ。
In the end, she hadn't killed the man. The desire to do so receded as they spoke. She didn't understand what the man was trying to say, but she thought and thought as hard as she could and finally reached a conclusion. The sword was her. She looked at it without denying it, and it had saved her. That's why she'd come to depend on it in her own pure-hearted way. Something in Kozupi's story made me curious. Who was that man? A homeless man with a big sign? It felt like I'd seen him a few times before too. Were they the same person? What I couldn't figure out is how the guy knew about the D-swords. Maybe the D-swords were famous in Japan, and I just didn't know it? No, there was no way. I looked over at Kozupi. Her expression was so calm and peaceful, it was hard to believe she'd been talking about killing people a moment ago. She ran her finger softly along the surface of the D-sword.
そういえばあのおじさん別れ際にこんなこと言ってたのら。君たちは特別な存在だ。中でも一番特別なのはその目、誰の目を産み落とした少年らしいんだって。
I was stunned. What did that mean?
西条くん、心当たりあるの？
いや、別に。
嘘ら。心は正直なんだよ。西条くんは今、ものすごーく関係ありますって考えてる。
Crap. It's hard when somebody knows your every thought.
なんか、怖い顔になってる。その目、誰の目って、西条くんが最初に考えたの？
I bit my lip and stood up. I pulled out the tissues I'd stuffed in my nose. The blood had stopped. Kozupi was looking up at me, confused.
どこへ？
I'm going home. My side still hurt, but I walked down the stairs instead of using the escalator or the elevator. That way I was able to avoid the crowds on my way out. Kozubi followed me hesitantly at a distance, looking like she was about to cry.
コズピー、何か怒らせるようなこと言ったかな。
I ignored Kozubi's question and tried my hardest to think. This homeless man that Kozubi had met, was he working with Shogun? Otherwise, why would he bring up Whose Eyes Are Those? Who was the boy they were talking about who created Whose Eyes Are Those? Me? No, that couldn't be right. I wasn't a special boy. I wasn't a hero. I couldn't even get the D-sword. I wanted to be just an ordinary person, an NPC even. I didn't want to be special. I never wanted to go through anything like what happened at Ofront again. But then, who was he talking about? I could think of only one possibility. The true NewGen killer, Shogun. He might have looked like an old man, but he had the voice and figure of a young boy. And there was something clearly weird about him, too. He was special. 2 of the 6 NewGen cases had involved the message, "Whose eyes are those?" It was a phrase I'd only ever used in my head. What could this seemingly innocuous phrase mean? Did it hide the reason that Shogun was after me? Should I try looking for that homeless man? He should be somewhere in the city. He was probably still carrying the sign with the weird message on it, too. What would I do if I found him? I stopped, and I shook my head and rejected the idea. What good would it do to find him? I might just be putting myself in more danger. He might be one of Shogun's servants, trying to lure me into a trap. What if I went to find the guy and triggered another quest? I'd experienced more than enough fear and pain in it already. It was probably the same for Kozupi. Why had she come to me with the ability to speak directly into my mind right now? Maybe she was like Yua and trying to take orders taking orders from Shogun. From all the stuff she'd said about killing, or almost killing people, she might even be involved in the NewGen murders. And Rimi had disappeared after the incident at Ofront. She'd stopped contacting me. Ayase was in the hospital after a failed suicide attempt. Nanami was safe, but the 2 people who were my allies were gone. Was there any guarantee that Rimi would come back? Was it even true that she just stopped coming to school? I only had Kozupi's word for that, and I couldn't tell if Kozupi was lying or not. I could feel the hairs on my body begin to stand up on end. My world was just an empty, desolate place. I had nothing to believe in. Everything seemed like a lie.
それは被害妄想なのら。
Kozupi was standing right behind me. Her internal voice was as happy as ever. She was carrying her wicked-looking D-sword in her hands and looking up at me innocently. I looked away. Are you on my side or my enemy? Which? Did you come to kill me?
コズピーはただ。
Just? Kozupi suddenly let out a weird shout. I looked up in surprise to see that she wasn't looking at me, but waving her hand off in a random direction.
セナさん見て。
Did she say Senna? Don't tell me. I followed her where she was looking, and sure enough...
小杖か。
Senna Aoi was walking towards us, holding a D-sword and looking like she was in an extremely bad mood. I tensed up and got ready to run. What was Senna doing here? Was this another coincidence, or a carefully planned trap? Did the 2 of them know each other? If so, had Kozupi called her? Maybe so the 2 of them could kill me together.
だからそれは被害妄想だよ。
But I didn't know what to believe in. I'd met Senna several times and she'd never tried to hurt me. But that didn't mean she wasn't my enemy, and she was scary.
セナさんは怖くないよ。
Kozubi didn't say that. Kozubi, don't say that where she can hear it.
怖い？何のことだ？
And just like I thought, Senna could hear Kozubi's voice too.
なんでもないです。
I was freaking out, but Kozubi looked really happy. She was still staring at the ground, but she was smiling as she tugged at the hem of Senna's shirt. The sight of the 2 of them was so heartwarming that I started to feel stupid for being nervous. They were like sisters, the strong-willed big sisters and the timid little sister who was linking up to her more than anyone else in the world. And they both had flat chests. Good job. No, wait. Don't think that. Kozubi will hear you again. And if you're not careful, you could easily die here. What was the deal with these two? Did they know each other from school? But they were in different grades. Maybe they were both connected by the fact that they had the swords. Or maybe they both worked for Shogun. I got into a cat's paw stance so I could run at any moment. Specifically, I stood up on my tiptoes. Supposedly, this made it so you can run really fast. Like a cat, I guess. I'd read about it in a manga once.
セナさんはね、コズピーが東京に来てから最初のお友達なのら。ね、
Senna didn't answer. Instead, she just glared at me. I thought she might attack me with a sword in her hand, but she didn't do anything. She didn't seem really upset that I called her scary either.
小杖、どうしてこいつと？
匠ちゃんはクラスメートです。
She sounded really excited about it.
ほいでね、匠ちゃんはコズピーの剣が見えるんだよ。
それは知っている。こいつもギガロマニアックスだ。
A giggle what?
ギガロマニアックス。理想度が見える人のこと。匠ちゃんもそうだよ。
Giggle maniac? Who the hell had picked that name? And if it had a name, did it mean that it was more common than I thought it was?
あは、セナさんはガルガリ君買いに行くとこなんですね。
それは。
Evidently, Kozupi had read Senna's mind. Come to think of it, Senna had been eating Garugari bar, Garugari-kun bar the last time we met, too. It was almost winter. With the weather this cold, I couldn't understand why anybody would want to eat popsicles. She must really like them.
ほいじゃあ、みんなで一緒に行きましょう。
I heard Kozupi's voice speak in my head as she playfully grabbed Senna's hand and started to walk.
匠ちゃんも、はーやく。
いや、僕は。
I turned to leave, but... Suddenly, Kozupi's eyes were filled with tears. She silently pleaded with me. She silently pleaded to me with her wet eyes. Next to her, Senna was looking like she was ready to bite my head off.
ついてこい。お前にもおごってやる。
From the looks of it, Senna was weak to Kozupi's teary eyes attack too. She motioned to me reluctantly, and we started heading towards the convenience store right behind the police box. We each bought a Garugari-kun, and the two of them sat down on the railings in front of the police box and began to nibble on their popsicles. Kozupi looked really happy. Senna looked straight-faced. I was on the verge of passing out from fear. There was a cop right in front of the police box. But the girls didn't seem concerned in the slightest that they were violating Japan's laws against deadly weapons right in front of his face. What was the cop's problem? I could see the two giant swords in front of him, in front of his face just fine, but instead of arresting them, he was ignoring them.
食べないの？
Since Kozupi was watching, I had no choice but to start nibbling on my Garugari-kun. I was intensely focused on where the people around us were looking. Senna and Kozupi were cute. The sight of two cute flat-chested sisters and a creepy otaku like me standing out in winter cold and eating popsicles was so surreal that we were sure to stand out. Or was I being paranoid after all? I could still hear the chuckles of my classmates. Was I hearing things? Was I imagining them? I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to be seen. I was scared of other people's gazes. I should have worn a hat. I wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. I decided the fastest way to do this was to chow down on my popsicle. As I did, though, my body started to freeze. This was definitely going to give me diarrhea later. And weren't the two of them cold?
で、小杖。なぜこいつと一緒なんだ？
こいつじゃなくて、匠さんですよ。匠さんが悪い人にいじめられてて倒れてたのら。だからコズピーが解放してあげたの。
Did she nurse me?
ディソードを使ったのか。
殺したかったとかバキって。
Kosubi tried to mimic the motion of killing someone with her hands. But since one hand was holding the huge D sword, she had to do it with the other. And of course the other hand held her Garagari-kun. Her popsicle, which she hadn't taken a single bite out of, flew out of her hand in a perfect arc. And then it landed on the ground and shattered. Kosubi looked at the remains of her popsicle with tears in her eyes.
うかつな真似は避けろと言っただろう。
ごめんなさい。もったいないお化けが出ちゃう。
アイスのことじゃない。ディソードのことだ。
Senna handed Kosubi her half-eaten Garagari-kun. Evidently, she was giving it to her. Kosubi smiled through her tears and bobbed her head in thanks. I didn't realize that Senna could be so nice. That was surprising.
でも悪い人には罰ゲームをするのが当たり前だよ。
Who was it who'd hurt those thugs so badly? Was it Kosubi, or was it me?
たくみさんセナさんはね、すごーく何でも知ってるんだよ。リソードっていう名前もセナさんに教えてもらったのら。あとリアルブータ、あれれブッダ
リアルブート。
What was that? I'd never heard that word before. Or that gigolo, what's that word for that matter?
リアルブートしてない件は誰にも見えなかったはずなのにね。セナさんにだけ見えてたの。リソードが見える人に会ったのセナさんが初めてだったんだ。その時はおひゃーって思って、なんで見えるんですかって聞いちゃった。ギガロマニアックスだからなんだって。
ギガロマニアックスって何なの？
さっき言ったのら。剣が見える人だよ。
No, I mean specifically, like, how does it work?
ディラックの海に干渉できる力を持つもの。それがギガロマニアックスだ。
Senna answered instead.
ディラックの海。
Senna glanced at me contemptuously when I didn't recognize the term. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm actually pretty smart, you know. I vaguely remember the Dirac being some concept in quantum physics.
負のエネルギーでいっぱいに満たされた観測不能の境界名とかだっけ？
大雑把に言えばそんなようなものだ。そしてそこに干渉するための端末がディソード。ディラックの海に突っ込んだパイプの先端と考えればいい。ディラックの海と繋がっているからディソードも負の物質で構成されている。無限に崩壊している存在なんだ。だから普段は普通の人間には触れることも見ることもできない妄想のようなものでしかない。このディソードこそあらゆるリアルブートのためのショートカット的役割を果たす。ディソードとディラックの海とのチャネルを大きくすることでディラック方程式の空港理論によって対生成が起き、粒子と反粒子を作り出せる。この粒子がギガロマニアックスが生み出す妄想、世界にとってのエラー。そのエラーを現実とするには作り出した粒子を他人のデッドスポットに送り込めばいい。粒子は即座に電気信号に変換され、周囲の人間に共通の認識、現実として成立する。逆に消したいときは粒子を送り込んだデッドスポットに今度は反粒子を送り込み追消滅してやればいい。
Come to think of it, Senna had said something similar before.
世界の仕組みは3つの数字で全て説明できる。0と1、そしてマイナス1。ディソードはそのマイナス1を生み出すためのショートカットになる。
This was starting to make my head hurt.
周囲の人間に共通の認識となると妄想が現実になるってどういうこと？
例えば、お前が今手にしているガルガリ君、お前にはどう見える？
どうって、水色をしたアイス。
その水色のアイスは本当に現実だと証明できるか？
What else could it be but Gorogari-kun, though? You could recognize it instantly by its distinctive color, and if you ate it, it would feel cold, which should be common sense, but...
人は目で見たものを脳が認識して初めてそれが水色のアイスと理解できる。でも脳が本人の意識しないままに嘘をついている可能性だってあるんだぞ。脳が生み出した自分一人だけがそう思い込んでいる妄想かもしれないんだ。
じゃあどうやって現実だって証明するの？
他の人もお前の持っているものが水色のアイスであると観測すれば、それは2人以上の人間の共通の認識となる。お前一人だけの妄想じゃなくなるんだ。妄想を現実にするときにはそれを逆説的に捉えればいい。
So, in other words, you could create a delusion in your own mind, and by using the particles created by the D-sword, force the other people around you to see it, thereby making it real. And I had this power too?
うずぴさっぱり。とにかくこの剣は普通の人には見えないの。
Kosubi gave the Garugari-kun back to Senna and suddenly ran out towards the street. For some reason, she began to swing the D-sword at people around her.
やべ！
I covered my eyes. She'd finally revealed her true nature. Kosubi was actually an insane killer. The street must be covered in blood right now. One thwack with that gigantic sword and you'll be sliced in two. Kosubi would be arrested on the spot. We were right in front of a police box after all. The cops would have seen the whole thing.
たくみさん、そんなことにはなってないよ。
I wasn't so quiet. She just killed people with a sword in broad daylight in the middle of Shibuya. But nobody was screaming. I couldn't hear any cops shouting either. I slowly opened my eyes. Nothing had happened. Kosubi was still swinging around the sword, though now she looked a little embarrassed. It was colliding with other people, with railings, with the ground, but nothing happened. It wasn't cutting anything. In fact, the sword was going right through it all, as if everything around it was just an illusion. No, that wasn't right. It was the other way around. The sword was what didn't exist. The people around her weren't reacting at all. They couldn't see it.
ピンポンピンポン。理想度は妄想の剣なのだ。
Ayase had said something similar once, actually. She'd said that only those with the power could see the sword. Next to me, Senna sighed in annoyance and nibbled on her Garugari-kun.
あのディソードは今は小杖の作ったエラーでしかない。周囲共通認識はまだ成立していない。
リアルブートしたらみんなに見えるようになるのです。
Real booting. That would be when you send particles into other people's dead spots, right? Not that I was sure what a dead spot was.
ズシャーってしたり、ドガーってできるようにもなるよ。
I'd like it a lot more if he used words instead of sound effects. But I've kind of got the basic idea. Swash was probably swinging the sword, and Thwack could be hitting with it. What was she swinging at, and what was she hitting? Was Kozupi really doing something so scary? And did I have that power too? No, I wasn't special. I'm not a giglomaniac or whatever that is. That's why I couldn't get my D-sword.
剣は見えたよね。だからそのうち匠さんも持てるの。
I can't. Even with all the stuff that was happening at Ofront, I couldn't get it. I could see it, but I didn't know how to grab it.
どうやって手に入れるかっていうと。
Kozubi looked at Senna expectantly. Senna sighed again.
バイオリズムの上昇によって中脳変影系ニューロンのドーパミンが過剰分泌された時、ディソードは現れる。それは危機的な状況や興奮、悲しみ、憎しみ、笑いなど人それぞれだ。ドーパミン分泌量が多ければそれだけ観測しやすくなる。
匠さん、そういうことなのら。
Senna's knowledge was incredible. It was possible that she was incredibly smart. Actually, she knew so much that there might be an entire field of study about this. Call it gigalomaniacology or something. I could almost guarantee that no other teenage girl in Japan could talk about such complicated things and use such technical terms. Where had she learned all this? Why did I keep meeting all these mysterious people? Somebody, please give me an answer. I'm tired of thinking. It made me feel sick, knowing only a few hints, but nothing that really mattered. But I didn't feel like looking into it myself, because none of these people were normal. Bitterly, I took the last bite from the melted Garigari-kun popsicle.
当たりだ。
Near the bottom of the stick, I could see the word winner. Kozubi had come back and was now looking at the stick in my hands.
匠さん、すっごいね。
大した運だな。
セナさん、自分も当たりが出て欲しかったって羨ましがってるのら。
そんなことは思っていない。
I don't think you can fool Kozubi like that. She knows exactly what you're thinking.
セナさんはいつも当たりが出ないかなとワクワクしながらガルガリ君を食べてるのら。当たりを引いたのはどれくらい
1割3分の何。
She calculated it really precisely. She must have kept a running tally with each one she ate. Senna finished her Garigari-kun. She glared at her stick and grunted. I could tell from the look on her face that she wasn't a winner.
よかったらどうぞ。
I nervously offered her the winning popsicle stick.
他人に施しを受けるつもりはない。私は自分の可能性を試しているだけだ。
でも本心では欲しいって言ってるね。
あげますよ。僕アイスはあんまり食べないし。
断る。
She wasn't even slightly interested? What a rude woman turning down somebody's kind offer like that. Or was this just her being a tsundere? It's not Moe if it's 3D, understand?
ほいじゃあこうしようよセナさん。この間二人で一緒にお勉強した渋谷言葉を言ってくれたら匠さんが当たり棒をあげるそうです。
いらないと言っているだろう。
いいから早く楽しい時に言う言葉っていうか超楽しくてマジやばい超ベリーグ
What? DQN-like words? Those were also a decade out of date, too. Had the two of them been studying that? It was kind of cute in a way, but...
渋谷に馴染むためなのら。さセナちゃん。
無理。今は無理だ。
無理じゃない。
無理だ。
Kozubi silently stared at Senna with tears in her eyes. Even Senna couldn't resist that.
っていうか超楽しくてマジやばいちょべりぐ
相変わらずセナちゃんは片言ですね。
Senna had started blushing and was turning away from me. I felt like I'd just seen something very rare and precious, This was the complete opposite of all the complicated theories she'd been spewing a moment ago. All hail Dere mode. I just see new possibilities in 3D girls. Good job, Kozubi. As promised, I gave Senna the winning stick. She took it with less resistance than I'd expected.
礼は言わないからな。
She very pointedly picked up her D-sword again and glared at me before looking back down at her feet. Why did she have to glare at me after I'd done something nice for her? Dealing with Senna was always such a pain. I wish she'd just stay in Dede mode all day.
それよりお前、
たくみさんですよ。
匠シャンなのか。
違う。シャンはつけなくても。
名前は
I was pretty sure I'd given it to her before, but evidently she'd forgotten it.
西条匠です。
だったら西条。もうこれ以上エラーを作るのはやめておけ。
は？
なんで？剣は自分の心なのら否定しちゃダメ。コズピーはこの剣のおかげで助かったよ。
I'm only here because of the sword. What happened in her past? I was also curious about that wish to kill she'd mentioned before, too.
妄想を現実にする行為にはリスクがつきまとう。粒子と共に追生成される反粒子はディソードにストックされていくんだ。反粒子は数学的に言えば過去へ向かうものだから。ストックすればするほどギガロマニアックスには現在の状態とのズレが発生し、やがてその矛盾により存在としての自己崩壊へ至る。
Please to speak Japanese, K thanks.
梢もあまりディソードを出すのはやめるんだ。普通に生活していきたいなら私の忠告を聞け。これはお前たちの命に関わる話だ。
Senna didn't seem to be joking. She didn't seem like the type who ever joked.
ましてや西条、お前はディソードなしでリアルブートした。本来ならそんなことできるはずがないんだ。リラックの海にはディソードを通してしか干渉できないんだから。お前は普通じゃない。奴らに目をつけられてもおかしくない。
奴らって。
ギガロマニアックスの力を悪用しようとしている連中がいる。
それって将軍？
知らない。誰だそれは。
Kosubi, did Senna just lie to me?
ついてないよ。
西条、将軍とは誰だ。
The coldness in her voice made me shudder. Suddenly, I couldn't look her in the eye. She grabbed me by the collar. It hurt to breathe. Sob. Why did you have to be so violent? Did I do something wrong?
そいつは40代ぐらいの男か。
違うよ。小さなじいさんだよ。
Senna immediately let go.
そいつもギガロマニアックスなのか。
わからない。でもニュージェネの真犯人だよ。
真犯人だと。
Senna put her finger up to her chin and began to think. The mood had suddenly turned sour. I felt a strange, indescribable fear. Senna knew something. But what? Who were these people who were trying to use the power of the Gigalomaniacs for evil?
あ、そうだそうだ。3人で記念撮影しましょう。ほらあれ。
Suddenly, Kozubi's cheerful voice broke at the silence. I looked to see where she was pointing. It was the arcade next to the police box. If she wanted to take a picture there, that could only mean exactly what I thought it did.
たくみさん、ほら真ん中。
いや、僕は。
セナさん、横見てたらダメです。
私はこういうのは。
コズピーだって初めてなのだ。ドキドキ。
Kozubi began tapping the buttons on the photo booth's console. A voice came from the screen before Senna and I could get ready.
はいポーズパシャッ
The photo it took didn't show the D swords.
ほいじゃあねまた明日なのら
Kozubi smiled and waved a little as she disappeared beyond the turnstiles. Senna and I watched her go. I would have preferred that she didn't leave me alone with Senna. But from the look of things, she wasn't ready to leave Shibuya yet. Was she going to wander around here like she always did? I wanted to head home immediately, but first there was something I needed to ask this professor of giglomaniacology. Senna just ignored me, frowning. She was a little better when Kozubi was around, but she was still so hard to deal with. My heart was pounding fast, but I figured she had to at least be hearing me, so I asked my question.
コズピーの心の声もギガロマニアックスの能力なの？
I wasn't expecting an answer. I'd assumed she'd just give me a and that would be the end of it. Senna gave me a glance before looking out over the big TVs at Scramble Crossing.
心の声はいわば妄想だ。
She actually answered.
梢はそれを他人のデッドスポットに送り込んでいるに過ぎない。仕組みはさっき説明したものと何も変わらない。送り込んだ粒子を映像ではなく音声に変換しているんだ。電話と同じだな。そして梢から心の声という妄想を送り込まれたことで、お前と梢の間で周囲共通認識が成立したんだ。テレパシーで会話しているように思えるが、全然違う。
だったら僕の心の声はどうしてコズピーに届いたの？
I certainly wasn't sending any delusions into her dead spots or whatever. It should be a one-way communication. But we were able to talk to each other regardless.
ギガロマニアックスは他人の妄想を見ることができる。梢は特にその能力が高い。他人が垂れ流す妄想をほぼ強制的に見せられていると言ってもいい。
Seeing delusions? Was that possible? I couldn't do that, so maybe I wasn't a giggle maniac after all. Senna's eyes suddenly became distant as she turned her gaze from the televisions to the people walking through the crossing.
ギガロマニアックスとなったものは誰だろうと一度は壊れているんだよ。
壊れたって何が？
心がだ。梢は東京に来る前、奴らに追い詰められて心を壊した。
Senna began to tell me what Kozubi had experienced before coming to my school. When she first met Kozubi, she'd seen what had happened like a video. Kozubi had always had the strange ability to read other people's minds. She'd managed, with great effort, to come to terms with her power and hide it from other people and lead something of a normal life. Then the mirrors appeared. After she started high school, Kozubi started seeing mirrors everywhere. At first she thought it was just a coincidence. It only happened maybe twice a day. But then, as time passed, it happened more and more. She would run into people holding mirrors more than 10 times a day. The encounters themselves were nothing special. A person on the street would be holding a mirror, a classmate would be doing their makeup in the bathroom, but whether it was coincidence or deliberate, it always seemed to end up that she'd see her reflection in them. And eventually the ones with the mirrors, both men and women, would start to laugh. They'd say in their minds, "Who are you?" In the classroom, at school, on trains, when she went out shopping, she'd see them everywhere she went. It wasn't any one person. In fact, it was all different. It was a different person each time. But Kozubi, she became suspicious of everyone holding a mirror, and became suspicious of everyone who was laughing. It wasn't long after that when people who weren't holding mirrors seemed to be saying, "Who are you?" She was on the verge of having a breakdown, as the voices of their minds echoed in her ears again and again. One day, Kozubi looked at herself in the mirror and whispered,
お前は誰？
The moment she spoke, she was terrified that she might soon no longer know who she was. There was a girl on the other side of the mirror with the same face as her speaking back.
お前は誰？
That's when she stopped speaking. She stopped being able to look in the mirrors too. But the voices asking, "Who are you?" didn't go away. She couldn't even tell whose voices they were anymore. She was like a broken fax machine that couldn't refuse incoming calls. Her power made sure that she heard other voices whether she wanted to or not. There was nothing she could do. Kozui's mind was falling apart. Then one day, in her second year of high school, she was staying late, cleaning up. 3 of her classmates were whispering to each other as they did their makeup, mirrors in hand. Mirrors and laughter. And then the voices asking, "Who are you?" whether it was the voices of her 3 classmates' minds or just a hallucination. It didn't even matter anymore. As she trembled in fear, she saw herself reflected in the mirrors. Her vision went dark for a moment. Was it deliberate or chance? It didn't even matter anymore. Her mind had been under so much pressure for a year that it finally snapped. The next thing she knew, she was screaming and a murderous instinct had overcome her. She saw the D-sword in the corner of her eye, and for the first time she grabbed it. And then she attacked them. All 3 had their mirrors in their right hands, and within a second, she'd used her real booted sword to slice their hands off. According to my schedule today, it wasn't a school day, but I'd come anyway for one reason: to see Rimi. I was sure my DQN classmates would be making fun of me again. It hurt, but I'd be willing to put up with it if it meant possibly seeing Rimi. As I walked through the school gate, I remembered my conversation with Senna yesterday. Before we parted ways, Senna said one last thing to me.
お前が望むと望まないとにかかわらず、もしこれ以上踏み込んでくるようなら、負を正にするぐらいの強い意識を持つんだな。中途半端な気持ちじゃ妄想に食われるだけだぞ。
I didn't want to get involved with anything dangerous, so I didn't ask anything more. I knew I wasn't going to get the D-sword anyway, no matter how hard I tried. I wasn't a hero. I was just a loser who couldn't even protect his own little sister. But there was a chance that Shogun would come back. He seemed to be coming after me as part of some sort of game, which meant the next quest might start whenever he felt like it. That scared me. The only reason I'd wanted a D-sword in the first place was because I was so scared of him. How was I supposed to protect myself from him without the sword? Have Rimi stay with me? But Rimi wasn't coming to school, and that worried me. What if he took Rimi hostage like he did with Nanami? Wasn't there anybody who could help me? It would have to be somebody who had a D-sword. Ayase was injured, so she was out of the question, and there was no way Senna was going to help me. And Kozupi was very strange. I entered the classroom with my head down. I took a single look around the room before I sat down. First, at Rimi's seat. Empty. She was absent again today. Or was she absent again today? Was she really just not coming to school, or was something more going on? I wanted to see her again, to see her cheerful face once more. Next, Kozupi. She was sitting in her seat, looking down, making herself as small as possible. I remember what Senna had said yesterday, which more than explained why she acted that way. Morning, Kozupi. We didn't look at each other, but we exchanged greetings in our mind. The DQN girls were grinning at me. It had only been a day. The label of creepy loser otaku who made a mess on TV wasn't coming off that quickly. The DQN boys evidently weren't here yet. The guys would often skip first period. That was more than fine by me. I sat down, and then I heard her voice as it called my name.
Taku, ohayo.
I gasped and looked up. Rimi was standing in front of me. She gave me a little grin and a wave.
久しぶり。
Rimi.
I wasn't imagining her. She was really here. She was breathing. Her hair bounced gently as she moved. She blinked every so often. She was really here. She was here. I felt the need to sniffle coming on. My heart felt like someone was squeezing on it hard. I felt like I was about to cry. I lifted myself up out of my chair, but then stopped, unable to move. I'm so glad I got to see you again.
ちょっとタク、どうしたの？もしかして泣いてるの？
I shook my head as hard as I could. If my DQN classmates saw me crying, they'd make fun of me again. I told myself that I wouldn't cry, but the tears just kept coming.
わかった。 私に再会できて嬉しいんだ。そうでしょ。なんてね。ちょっと自意識過剰だったかな。
All I could do was keep shaking my head. I couldn't even look up at her. If I did, I'd start sobbing right on the spot. Then someone slapped me on the back.
おう、タク。
It was Misumi, with an awkward expression on his face. He hadn't slapped me nearly as hard as he used to. Just yesterday he'd been ignoring me. Why was he talking to me again? If he did, it would ruin his life. The decuans in the class would bully him. That's right. Both Rimi and Misumi would be better off if they didn't talk to me at all. When I didn't respond, Misumi forced a smile onto his face.
暗いな。朝から新規臭いぜ。ま、お前はそういうやつだって分かってるけどな。
He was being as rude as ever, but it didn't feel like he was being mean. That was just how he always talked.
そういう大臣は朝から無駄に爽やかだね。
無駄にとか言うな。久々に学校来たと思ったらいきなりそれか。
じゃあ、嘘くさい爽やかさ。
なたく、この言い草どう思うよ。
I gave him a vague nod. I'd managed somehow to stop the tears. Life was back to normal, at least in terms of what was in front of me right now. The two of them didn't seem to be bothered at all by the fact that they might end up bullied by the rest of the class.
そういえば、岸本のことを聞いたか。まだ入院中らしいぜ。怪我は大したことなかったんだけど、精神的にかなり参ってるらしい。いいか、タク。女を落とすのに一番手っ取り早いのは、弱ってる時に優しくしてやることだ。というわけで俺、本気で岸本の見舞いに行こうかなと思ってんだよね。
大臣最多。ブーブー。今度こそ彼女さんに刺されるよ。
お見舞いに行くだけだろ。別にやましいことじゃねえよ。
ほんの数秒前と言ってることが違うし。
そういえばタクって岸本と知り合いだったよな。な、一緒に行ってくんね。
That sounded like something Misumi would usually say. I was sure he was going to ask me about my supposed psychic powers, so I was actually kind of surprised. He kept talking a while after that. Misumi would talk, and sometimes Rimi would make smart comments, and I'd just kind of nod along. It was the same as it had been before. And that made me happy. Alright, why don't we stop it there. This is Audapostrophe. You've been watching Chaos Head Noah running on Nintendo Switch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.